For too long, the people of Darfur have suffered at the hands of a government that is complicit in the bombing, murder, and rape of innocent civilians. My administration has called these actions by their rightful name: genocide.
In keeping with what I've come to learn, that everything we're being told is a lie. We've just seen the orchestrated campaign against Libya. We all rally round, and it's actually falling apart, fortunately. But we saw it countless times with other despots, demons. There's just no end to it. Well, I was just talking to Thomas Mountain in East Africa by telephone, and he was explaining that the Darfur genocide never actually existed. It was just trumped up and used as an excuse to get foreign troops in, and I think to split up Sudan. But anyway, we're just being fed loads of stuff, and apart from current things that are unfolding, there's all the lies that we've been told from our childhood, through our schooling, basic beliefs that we have, which probably are not true. Reminds me of the Soviet Union when communism collapsed. You know, the communists kind of had a nervous breakdown, a lot of them. Couldn't believe it. I mean, all their pillars just suddenly disintegrated. Well, we're fast approaching some kind of parallel equivalent here in the West, where the actions of our leaders is so cutthroat and ruthless. You know, there's a collapse of trust and faith. So something's got to give. Here's Thomas Mountain talking about the fallacious Darfur genocide that never really existed, but we all bought it.
There never was a genocide in Darfur. There was a conflict in Darfur. It's a serious tragedy. Maybe about 30,000 people died in the fighting, and most of the fighting that took place there from the end of 2003 to the end of 2004. Now, all the claims that there was a genocide in Darfur come from very dubious sources within the United Nations. There's no evidence whatsoever to back it up. And I tell you what, there is something that there's no question about, and that is, this is something that I've confirmed with numerous representatives from 8 organizations that were active in Darfur. The victims of the conflict in Darfur were the beneficiaries of the largest, best-run relief effort in history. And that without the active support and leadership of President Omar al-Bashir of Sudan, this would not have been possible. In other words, at the same time that Bashir was supposed to be carrying out a genocide in Darfur, he was actually playing a critical role in the success of the largest, best-run relief works in history. The most successful humanitarian works in history was benefited victims of the Darfur conflict, and this would not have been possible without Bashir support and leadership. So it doesn't make any sense at all. One, that he would be carrying out a genocide at the same time and playing a critical role in helping to save hundreds of thousands of lives of the same people. Now, we know that this Darfur relief works was the best run humanitarian works in history. That's incontrovertible. On the other hand, the claims that there was 100,000 and 200,000 and 300,000 and the same Darfur people at one point claimed that there were 400,000 victims of the Darfur genocide, a claim that was so fantastic that the British media watchdog forced that claim to be withdrawn. They wouldn't let them use it on the TV in England. Now the victims of that conflict, or their children are in school, they've got medical facilities, and things like that. Now, it doesn't mean it wasn't a tragedy. It doesn't mean that 30,000 people died in those 2 years of fighting, but it was by no means a genocide. And I have another article entitled Darfur Dollars Funding West Bank Settlements, about how the fraudsters in the so-called State Darfur movement, most of whom are very strong supporters of Israel, diverted billions of dollars from the money they collected supposedly for the victims of the Darfur conflict and sent it to help fund activities in so-called humanitarian activities in the West Bank and illegal settlements that Israel has built on the West Bank. And this is something that is a real scandal, because there's never been any sort of public accounting of how much money the so-called Save Darfur movement collected on behalf of the victims of the Darfur conflict and what they spend on. And this was first brought to my attention by people that were working in Darfur as a part of the relief movement, And we're wondering where all this money that was being collected on the Darfur people's behalf was going, because they weren't seeing any of it on the ground in Darfur. And they started asking questions, and some of them actually contacted people they knew in the same Darfur organizations, and even these people were upset about it, that there'd been commingling of funds between money that had been collected supposedly to help the Darfur people and funds that were being used to fund humanitarian work in illegal settlements on the West Bank, for example, daycare centers and clinics. Okay, Bernard Levi was a part of the whole Save Darfur fraud that took place in Europe and the United States. That he was one of the leading proponents of the so-called Darfur genocide in Europe, particularly in France. And he helped perpetrate this whole idea that there was a genocide going on in Darfur to help justify the attempt to put Western boots on the ground in Sudan. What they wanted was to get so-called peacekeepers in there in the Darfur to occupy Western Sudan and help the dismemberment of Sudan, which is going on now, and to take control of the potential vast oil and water resources that are supposed to exist in Darfur. So this Bernard Levi was part of that whole fraud that was carried out in the name of supporting the people in Darfur, and they didn't ever care a lick about the people in Darfur. And as a matter of fact, it was actually used to help cover up the real genocide that's been going on since 2007 by the Western and Bernard Levi supported Ethiopian regime in Ethiopia.
So you could say, in one sense, he failed because he didn't get Western troops in, but they succeeded because they dismembered the state and cut it in half.
Yeah, they've done that, but I have another article I'll be writing called The U.S. Plan to Destabilize Sudan. Well, I'll be going into this more. I'm still doing research on it, but it's pretty clear that the United States is well on its way towards trying to create a conflict in another war in Sudan and cutting off the oil flow from the El-Abbadi oil fields and eventually diverting it back into Western hands and kicking China out of Sudan. And but in any case, that's sort of the long-term plan they had. And the Darfur genocide the myth was a part of an attempt to demonize Bashir and set the basis for Western intervention. I mean, people like Angelina Jolie held a press conference calling for the United States to declare war and invade Sudan. I mean, there was a whole big propaganda campaign carried out there, while all along a real genocide was going on in Ethiopia, which the West was funding, and which Bernard Levi never opened his mouth about and was complicit in.
No, it sounds like parallels with Libya today. You know, it's not that hard to lead a nation astray when you're being pushed with alcohol and deviance left, right, and center throughout the media from morning till night. That is what we see. So, you know, we kind of deserve to be treated with contempt until we can get our act together, really.